Hello, everybody. It's Deb here. Today we have Moreah with us, and our podcast today is going to be about relationships, of course, and the 3 levels of encounters. And we are so lucky that Moreah has made herself available for the whole month of August. We are going to have 5 episodes where we're going to talk about A Course in Miracles and the different, relationships we have to ourselves and to other people related to what the Course in Miracles actually gives us as a guide, how we can live our lives better. So without further ado, I'm going to let Moreah introduce herself to us.
Well, thanks, Deb, for having me again on the podcast. You know that one of my favorite things to do is talk about A Course in Miracles, as I have been a student of the Course for, 30 years. And I believe, for me anyway, that it has been the vehicle for me to transform my relationships, understand relationships, and to just have more peace and clarity about my mind and how it operates and what parts of it are worth listening to and which parts of it should just be deleted. And that's a big thing when it comes to relationships, because I know that when I started the Course in Miracles, it actually started, I began learning about the Course in Miracles through a spirit guide that I was having through my meditations. And later it was revealed to me that it was actually the scribe of A Course in Miracles, Helen Schuckman, that was kind of knocking on my shoulder and saying, you know what, your partner isn't the problem. He was my boyfriend at the time. I hadn't married him yet. He said, you know, the way you're thinking about him is the problem, and the stories you tell yourself about him are the problem, and the ideas about how you think the relationship is meant to be and in its fantasy form is the problem. So he made very clear to me that my thinking was going to either take me to a place to heal that relationship and make it more peaceful and loving, or I could use my thinking to continue to destroy it. And that's how I started with the Course in Miracles. Mid-80s is when that journey started for me. So I love to talk about it, and I'm excited to talk about it with you. And as you know, many of the people you work with, those conversations will come back to relationships.
Exactly. And today we're going to talk about the 3 different levels of encounters and how that's related to relationships. So this is now episode number 2, and we are going to have 5 episodes in total. And enjoy what you're going to hear. Moreah is going to talk about the 3 levels of encounters.
So in the Course in Miracles, it spends the majority of the book really talk about 2 things. It talks about relationships and how, from the Course in Miracles perspectives, relationships are meant to come into our lives. And we are told that the Holy Spirit, which is an idea within our mind, and we're taught that God is an idea and we are an idea, and healing is an idea, love is an idea, forgiveness is an idea. All these things are ideas. And that from the Course in Miracles perspective, relationships and understanding the purpose of the body, which we'll also have another episode on and talk about, are there for our spiritual awakening. And when we understand what we're doing in our relationships and why they come into our lives, when we understand them more fully, they really are there to make us happy. And although many of our listeners won't say my relationships aren't generally making me all that happy, and we look at the divorce rate and separation rate and people shuffling relationships like cards, thinking that they're going to find the right one instead of realizing we're with the right one, even if it's a difficult relationship, it is still right.
Yeah. So when you say our relationships are meant to help us with the awakening, so what is that? The wake for some people who are not so understanding of what does it mean to be awakened?
Well, from the Course in Miracles perspective, it says that we are created as God created us. So we are spirit, we are perfect, we are eternal. And so through relationship, what we discover is that we don't identify ourselves as that way. We don't identify ourselves as love. We don't identify ourselves as light and spirit. And because of that, the relationships help us to remember that. So through relationships, we are able to see the blocks that we put in front of our hearts that prevent us from loving and seeing each other as we truly are as spiritual beings. So in the Course in Miracles perspective, it says that you're going to shift through relationships. Not all relationships are meant to last 20, 30, 40 years. In fact, the Course in Miracles says that there are very few, usually in most people's lifetime, that they'll have very few lifelong relationships, and that we will have the majority of our relationships, which it identifies as special relationships, which are relationships that generally will last a few months to maybe 30 years, 20 years, 15 years. Mm-hmm. And the Course in Miracles says is that within us, there is like a dating computer, if you will, and we attract into our lives the people that we have. I wrote a book, Cosmic Dance, and that we have to dance with. So you and I have a cosmic agreement to have a dance because we've been in relationship for, almost probably eight years now.
Yes, correct.
And so you and I have a dance, me and my current husband have a dance, me and my children have a dance. And all of those dances are meant to help foster my own awakening to my own divinity through seeing the divinity in the people around us. And the Course in Miracles says that there are 3 levels of encounter. One is the very casual encounter, someone you'd meet in an elevator, maybe the checkout gal or gentleman at the checkout grocery store. Somebody that could have road rage and you end up at the light and he's giving you the finger. Yes. All of these are very quick encounters, but they're also very powerful encounters because they give us an opportunity to see how we deal with people that we don't particularly feel connected to. And the Course in Miracles says that every encounter is a holy encounter because we are destined to be near these people, meet these people, whether it's at a very casual level, a quick encounter, or a lifelong encounter.
And usually the parents would be lifelong encounters because you can't have your parents because you're born from them, and so the relationship lasts even if you're separated from them physically.
I think that for some people no, and for other people yes. I did not have a very long relationship I didn't have my mother in my life past age 16, and I didn't have a total of my father in my life maybe for 7 years. So what you're speaking to is that I'm listening to the things they taught me as a child, the ideas they placed in my mind. And that's true because my relationship that I had with my parents, I'm going to relive through my romantic partners usually. Because marry our mother or our father because the soul is trying to work it out. It's trying to figure out what didn't work in the childhood. And so if you look at it from the perspective and say, okay, so then my husband in some levels helping me do healing I could have done with my parents had they been physically in my life, that would be true. So on that level, but from the Course in Miracles perspective, because we're spirit, all relationships are eternal. So even that brief encounter, the way that I smiled at that child that was on the elevator, or the way that I went, oops, with that little one that bumped into me, not knowing that I was there, all those encounters, all those moments, holy instants, the Course in Miracles says, we were given the opportunity to see each other's divinity instead of being focused on the personality and the form.
Yeah, well, I have in my memory, since I was a child, like maybe 8 years old onwards, when I meet people, like I would always be very judgmental about if they fitted into my little story. If they were different to me, I wouldn't go to them. There was always socioeconomical things, if they were higher or lower than me, or if they were in the same region as me. So there was always judgmental about that. So I never felt like I was connected to those people that I judged harshly. So that would be part of the separation and the ego mind, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And when we look at the world and the state of the world, everything in the world is really set up for us as physical beings and not so much for us as spiritual beings. And so we're the egoic level of mind, the Course in Miracles tells us that we have a split mind. So there's a portion of our mind that is very attached to our humanity, to our physicality. And then we have a part of the mind that is whole, it's integrated, it is part of everyone and everything. And so through our relationships, we are able to move and shift ourselves from that lower egoic separated, judgmental aspect of thought and belief systems, and examine them within ourselves to see how we project those beliefs onto the people and relationships that we're having.
Yeah. And that's a good note, because I'm just thinking about it. When I was around 8 years old, the reason I did that, I think, was definitely out of fear. Like, I definitely felt like I had to protect myself or the way I view the world or my family. And so it was always that the ego mind kind of hijacks you and says, well, in order for you to be this, what you know, you have to be judgmental to others, or you have to protect yourself from others. And then you just run with that story your whole life. And I guess when I was in my mid-20s and I started to do meditation and yoga, I did that a lot with my close relationships. Like, I did the work with the people that I had in my life, but not so much with the people with those encounters, like you explained it, like you just have a moment with those people, not so much with those people. And that I only did later on in my life, because when I understood that, oh, okay, your mind is still doing that. It's maybe not doing that so much with the big relationships in your life, because you're working on them and you have brought kind of light to it. You've brought some awareness to it. But it was great to know that I have the capacity to have it with these encounters that were just fleeting as well. So they were just not for the mid-sized relationships in my life, which was good.
Right. And so the Course in Miracles shares with us that from at the level of personality and body identification, and we enter into relationships at the level, and it discusses very clearly that there is the special hate relationship, the special love relationship, and then what it refers to as the holy relationship. And by whole, not as a spiritual iconic word holy, but whole as in one, that we recognize at the level of the whole holy relationship is that we are bringing our totality, all we have, all our goodness, all our love, all our compassion, all our forgiveness, all our capacity to overlook personality and ego. And we're bringing all of that to all of our relationships, not just our romantic relationships, not just to our parents, not just to our children, but to each and every relationship. But it also says, be very aware, because most of your relationships are special. And by special, it means you single out a specific person that you believe has something you don't have. And so whether some people, it could be power, because beauty and money actually always
attract each other.
They attract each other, or it could be power in an office or something. But at some level, your ego has told you don't have this, whether it's...
So you need to, I recognize that completely, because I think I did that with a couple of relationships in my life.
Right. And so those are called the special relationship. And the Course in Miracles says you have the opportunity, should you want to do that, is to become more self-aware about the people in your life and the way that you have them in your life, to identify, how am I using them? Get out of the barter in your relationship, and own it, recognize it, develop that awareness that whatever you think they have that you don't have is actually there, and transform the relationship to a whole state where you're saying, I'm with you to give all I have, not to give you things and you give me things. It's not a barter, but it moves up in vibration to a level of choosing to love instead of judge.
Yeah. And also what happens to us is when we go into a relationship because the other person has something we have, and once we come to a place where we have developed that ourselves, we see many people then leave their partners, because it's like, I now have that thing that I thought I wanted from you, but I actually have it for myself. So then you also get people divorcing, their spouses, because now they think, oh no, I have this thing now, so I don't need it from you anymore. What do you say about that kind of separation?
Yeah. And I think that's a common, and people, many people aren't aware that they're doing it, because this is half of the level of awareness that you have to really look to see, I'm kind of discarding this person now because I've gotten all I can get from them.
Yes.
Or I'm no longer willing to give them what they want from me. I'm tired of that game. So I'm just going to find someone bigger and better, or more beautiful, more.
Yeah.
And so the Course in Miracles understands that that is the nature of our human mind. And so it doesn't frown upon us for those that do the learning. And I said, some people can do the learning that they need to do because the balance between the two partners is perfect, and they can do that learning with one individual. And other people, they have to go through many
more. And there's I'm so happy that you're saying that there's no judgment if it happens with one or many. It just isn't, because we're all so different and we're all learning different. And I guess Spirit is going to use whatever means to wake us up. It means if you need one, you'll get it. If you need 10, you'll get it. Right.
And in my private practice for years, because I worked with couples, many couples, I would say to them, when one of the partners was so sad that the other partner was not going to continue with the therapy or the counseling to put the marriage back, I would say to them, one of the reasons people intuitively need to leave relationships is because when you meet the new person, they give you permission to be the person you've grown into. And some people within their relationships, their long-standing relationships, don't have the wherewithal to allow the person that's growing, because the relationship is fostering the growth, to then say, okay, well, maybe you used to nag about this, but you don't do that anymore. And in my mind, I keep thinking that you do. And so if you get a new partner, that person's never going to know that about you because you've healed that part of your personality. So I think a great deal of people switch partners, largely because the partner we're with doesn't have the capacity to let us become better versions of ourselves.
And that's basically because they themselves are stuck. Because like when you're doing the work on yourself, like you're going to see it, like, because everything that you're looking really for outside in yourself is what you don't have. So when you know that, when you see that being reflected back at you, then you start to do the work, don't you?
Absolutely.
But if you're always the one looking for the other person to do the work, but you don't want to do anything, then of course it's not going to work for you.
Absolutely. And like you said, if you are doing I always say to my husband, I said, tend your own garden. I'll tend my garden, your garden.
Yes.
And he's a long time student now of the Course in Miracles as well. And he laughs now because, he used to get so upset because he would say things and I wouldn't defend myself. And he goes, it just infuriates me. You need to defend yourself and say these things about you. And I said, well, what you're saying is your belief system. They're your projections. They're not really real. They're not real for me. So I'm not teach them. There's nothing to defend against because these are your illusions, not my illusions.
Yeah. And that's actually, I have that too. You can have a lot of fun when you have that in all your relationships, because the moment you want to defend your point of view, you must know the ego is at play.
Absolutely.
So it's like, it's just amazing. The moment you feel like you have to do that, you have already lost, because like you said it early on, quickly, we are infinite. And, this infinite self doesn't need defending, doesn't need rescuing, doesn't need saving, doesn't need any of these things that you're making up. So you are the only one that's responsible for making that up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then once we become aware of that within our relationships, because we all know relationships are difficult. They can be very, very. But when we have that base awareness that when we are triggered, it is never, the Course in Miracles says, never upset for the reason you think. Never.
I remember Moreah told me this information many years ago. And I was like, well, yeah, it's never. She basically, it's never. I'm like, oh, okay. And
but the ego and the personality don't want to hear that. The ego and the personality, but. And in my private practice with couples, when, one would say something and I'd say, you can just disregard that comment. You don't have to respond to it or that behavior. They'd say, I'm not going to be a doormat to that. And I'd say, well, you have a choice. You can be peaceful or you can be right. And right is never going to get you the relationship you want. Peaceful.
Yeah, and I remember some conversations I had with you many years ago, when you said that to me about with relationships and how you don't have to defend them. And sometimes our conversation could be hard, and sometimes I would get a little bit upset, but there was so much love for you. That when you did give me that information, even though I didn't like it, so there was that ego side that wanted to defend that point of view, I still took the information and I worked with the information, and that's how I transformed it. So if you're listening to this and there's some information that doesn't resonate with you, or you feel like you have to, you have to defend a point of view, it's okay, because it takes time. But the one thing you must know is that if you're not happy in your life, if you're creating pain and suffering through not being aware of what you're contributing to that, then you're always going to be in the dark. So it's, you have to at some point make a choice to say, let me try something different, because obviously this isn't working.
Absolutely. And I love what you're saying, for a person, when you're unhappy, to take the personal responsibility. Because with me, when I have clients, I said to them, listen, you've made a mess of things, but the good news is you made it, and so you can unmake it. And in our relationships, the same thing. If you take personal responsibility for what is your part, what are your thoughts, what are your expectations of this person that you love that are getting in the way? Because the Course in Miracles tells us that person isn't in your life to show up for the way that you think they should show up. That person's in your life to give you an opportunity to show you the things in yourself that you don't see, that you're projecting onto the relationship and into the world. And they're just mirroring it to you. So you have an opportunity to see it and then heal it, forgive it, forgive yourself, forgive others. Because the Course in Miracles says you are free to free yourself by forgiving others.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, there are some things that people don't want to forgive because they feel like, the other person did it to them, so they don't want to forgive them, and they get stuck there. So what would you say to them?
Well, as you know, Deb, no one can do anything to us. Even if somebody is rude or insulting towards me, I make the decision on whether that's going to land on me or not. And generally, when people behave in that way, it fosters compassion in me, because I know that the Course in Miracles says your responsibility is to love. And someone's either loving to you and loving back is natural to do, or somebody is calling for love. And so if somebody's behaving in that way, I generally will go inside, ask for a miracle, ask that this person might have peace, because obviously they don't have peace, because we're in a loving, peaceful state. We're loving and peaceful in the world. And so you can't do something to someone. I make the decision on what's done to me. And the Course in Miracles stresses this at length. You are the decision maker. You can decide which voice to listen to, that of that little devil, that ego voice that's defensive and judgmental and guilt-ridden, or you can listen to that soft inner guide that says, let it go.
Yeah. Because forgiveness is for you.
It is. It's for us. It's not for
for you. So Absolutely. I hope that, you can hear that. And just understand that at all times you have the choice. Your point of view gets to make you free or imprison you. But ultimately you do it to yourself. You either choose to stay in the prison, or you make a decision and you walk out of the prison through changing your point of view of the situation.
Right. And so let's talk a little bit about the special hate relationship, because we all have those relationships, or we have those encounters where, and we have to be honest with ourselves, and it happened to me yesterday while I was on the road in this car. it was supposed to go a certain mileage and we're doing more than 25 miles and I was just fuming. I had to get somewhere and get home for an appointment, and this car's in front of me, and the thoughts I'm having are just outrageous. And it went on for about 2 minutes, and then I caught myself and I'm going, I don't know. And the thought came to me and said, he could be saving your life. And I'm going, what do you mean? And I'm going, I don't know. I could have been going forward and a bear was on the road, or I'm up in the Northwoods. I don't know, but I have to trust there was a reason. And so, but at first that feeling, and I was so pumped up and happy to be angry and release whatever is going on. Course in Miracles says those relationships are powerful if we can catch ourselves in the act to realize at what level we still have hatred and anger and judgment in our minds, so that we can see it. I wouldn't have known that was sitting in there that day had that gentleman wasn't driving so slow?
Mm.
And then I
So
could
that's
go.
so that's another encounter that was kind of fleeting. So we
A
got to pay
fleeting
attention
encounter.
to all the encounters that we have.
Absolutely. And how we deal with those encounters. And for me, it was like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, I've been feeling relatively peaceful and calm. And then bam, all those feelings.
Brought it up to the surface, right?
Absolutely.
So we should be grateful. Yeah.
That's why yes. And that's what the Course in Miracles says. Every relationship has the opportunity to help us awaken to our thoughts, our beliefs, our expectations. And so we can start to self-analyze and realize which of our thoughts, because every thought creates at some level, the Course teaches us. We're at the world of illusion. We're making thoughts that create illusory worlds, or we're at the thought level of the real world, which is creating thoughts that come from love. And so we have the choice in every moment. Where do we want to use our minds? How do we want to be in the world? How do our relationships want to be transformed? Through making that process, that decision, day by day, moment by moment, to see. Because we're students of the Course. Students means we do have those thoughts.
Yes.
We recognize them, we own them, we forgive ourselves for them, and then we move on.
Yeah. So that's great to know, because a lot of people think, oh, you're only going to do the work for one day and then the next day you don't have to do the work anymore.
No.
It's an everyday thing. But one of the things that will help us a lot is like, if you can catch yourself out, because a lot of the stuff is happening unconsciously. So that's why people, when you try to tell it to them, they don't believe it, because it's all happening on this unconscious level. So the more meditation, stillness, even yoga practice, the more or even gardening, the more you just come back to a still place in yourself, the more you start to recognize that you are not that thinking. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You have emotions. You create emotions. You create thoughts. But maybe you have a choice to create a different thought and, to trigger a different emotion. So that if you are in a pattern of creating crazy thoughts and crazy relationships, then you can take a moment to step back and say, okay, why am I creating these thoughts? And you can actually stop. You not stop the thoughts, but you can stop acting on the thoughts. You can stop, creating that thought process to go over and over and over. And you're just repeating that same pain and suffering, because the thinking is definitely creating the life, isn't it? So the mind is there and the thoughts come from the mind, and the thoughts, then your life becomes your thinking. So if you're not happy there, then you take a moment, take a step back. And that's usually in a daily discipline. Like even if you're taking a daily discipline of the Course of Miracles, it actually for 365 days, there's a lesson. So if you take that lesson once a day and you just look at your life from that perspective, you'll catch yourself out, won't you? And that's how you're ultimately going to change it, because only we can change it. And I think there's this illusion, myself included, when I was younger, I used to think that the world has to be different for me to be happy. That person has to be like that. That place has to be like that. This person shouldn't do that. And that I'm not happy because that person did that. And it was all a lie. And I would have waited until I was a gray old lady, and I would have never been happy, because those things and places and people will never change to make me happy, because they're not here to make me happy. So that was a big realization, is that you are responsible for your happiness, for your life. And coming back to the partner, and coming back to all the levels of encounters, nobody that you encounter is here to make you happy, because you are happiness itself, but you just don't know yet.
Yes, and of Course in Miracles says relationships are meant to make us happy. God himself or herself or itself, or however you identify with God. For me, God is light and love, but God expanded itself to create more of itself, which in the Course in Miracles is called Son of God, which is the collective of all of our humanity. And God did that to be happy, to share its love with something. And if we look at our relationships as opportunities to share our love and our light, they bring us so much more joy, rather than creating stories of what's going on in our partner's mind, or why they do what they do. We don't have a clue what's going on in their mind. So we're so much happier when we drop the stories about ourselves, story about other, and instead live in this moment and enjoy the light that's there in them now.
Wonderful. That's so wonderful. That's a great way. So listeners, I hope that you got a few little bits here. Actually, there was a lot here that can help you to improve all the types of relationships in your life. And Moreah and I will be back next week, and we're going to have episode 4. Looking forward to that. Moreah, thank you so much. We appreciate you always. Thank you for making time for us. I know you're on your summer vacation, and I appreciate so much you making time for us to talk to our listeners about this very, very important stuff. So we will see you all next week.
Thank you.